have that moment of reflection, please? Okay. I will now read the acknowledgement statement, the Indigenous Acknowledgement Statement. We would like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards of the land. The municipality is located within the boundary of Treaty 18 region of 1818, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wyandot peoples. Okay, I don't think we have to review the teleconference procedures. Let me see, Lois. I think you've all got a copy of the agenda. Are there any additions to that agenda?
I just have a question, Morris. It might be
Yes.
an addition. Do we need to review the topics for our next meeting with the mayor, deputy, CAO of the town? It's coming up before our next board meeting. Or do we have enough already?
That's in a week and a half or something, isn't it? 2 weeks?
July 5th, I think.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You mean from a board point of view?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we did that before, Sabrina. Can we add that in someplace?
I will add that in, yes.
Whereabouts?
I will put that onto our,
F3 maybe?
well, we'll put it into F3.2.
Okay, what do we call that? That's the meeting there.
Prep for July 5th, board and council executive.
Good, I have a note of that. May I have someone move the adoption of this agenda as amended? Excuse me. I need a mover. Lori, and seconder. Do I hear a seconder?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. All in favor? That seems to be carried. Okay, we have 3 reports which we should receive before we start talking about them. I'll come back to the other thing. ADM 2118, ADM 2119, and Governance 2110. Can I have a mover, someone to move that this board receive as information those 3 reports? Someone to move? Rob and seconder Gary, all in favor? Opposed? None. Carried. Does anyone have any pecuniary interest in this particular meeting? I missed that item, so.
I was looking, where did he go?
Oh, you got to be quick. All right, hearing none, I'll move on. The minutes of the previous meeting, that's D1. You've all received those. They are called closed minutes. Threw me off for a minute, but anyhow, are there any errors or omissions on those minutes?
Morris?
Yeah, sorry, Roy, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed that I moved a motion seconded by Jesse that we would release the report 2116 to the consultants. And I didn't see that in the minutes. I think I mentioned it to Sabrina. I think she has some wording that she's recommending.
Yep.
Go ahead, Sabrina. What were you going to say, Sabrina?
Oh, sorry. I actually just closed the document. Give me 1 second. I'm just pulling it back up. So I have added that in, and it is Sorry, just getting the
Drum roll,
right
please.
motion there. So it is a new number 82 that we are releasing the document. Remuneration concerns and salary study planning report be released to the Gallagher Benefit Services Group consultant, and it is number 212181. So it just moves all of them down. And that was moved by Lori and seconded by Jesse.
And it was carried. I
Yes.
assume. Okay. And you will add that to those minutes.
Yes, I have.
Yeah. I have one small point here, and really I'm being very technical for you, Sabrina. Looking at it's on the page 3 of those minutes. The resolution 2021-078. Part of that resolution says that any draft agreement to be brought back at the next regular meeting. That wording it that way defines it that it should have been brought back today.
And actually, we had talked about it being July, possibly being August, and we were going to let Ruth make the decision when that was going to occur.
Why don't we just change that to at a next
Yes.
regular meeting? Then it leaves you wide open for when you get back to it. Is that fair?
Yes.
Everyone happy with that minor thing? Okay. May I have someone move that this board approve the circulated the minutes of June the 3rd, 2021, the closed session, including the few adjustments. Someone to move? Laurie, and seconder? Rob, all in favor? That's carried.
And then, Mr. Chair, just for the record, those were closed minutes, but we thought the discussions were what was the closed topic. So those will actually be published on our website with our other minutes, because the conversations were the part that we deemed as being confidential, and the resolutions are not.
Yeah, I understood that. Is there any business arising from those minutes?
I had none.
Well, I don't see any. Anyone else? Excuse me. We'll move on then to, well, I guess we're jumping quite fast now into item E, deputations. Are we stepping right now into Gallagher Benefit Services?
We are. So we do have the consultants with us, and I have given them the ability to co-host so they can share their screens.
And will you introduce them?
I will actually let our manager of HR do an introduction, if that's all right with you.
No problem.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sarah Trainer, Manager of Human Resources at the Town of the Blue Mountains, and I'm pleased to introduce Jane Mazansky, who, through just a bit of background, we are obviously undertaking a compensation and pay equity review, and we did go through a competitive tendering process that did identify Gallagher as the preferred consultant. And so Jane Mazansky, who is the senior consultant with Gallagher and our project lead for this this work here today, to take this group through an overview of the upcoming review. And we'll be happy to ask any questions at the end. So nice to see everybody, though virtual, and I'm going to pass it off to Jane to get us started.
All right, thank you very much.
Welcome, Jane.
Good morning. Is it morning? Good afternoon, sorry. So I just have a very brief slide presentation, and by all means, if you have questions as we go through the presentation, just interrupt me. I'm doesn't faze me or anything, so we'll go through it. Okay, I guess I have to share my screen. Okay. Is that working? No. That's fine. Sure. Okay. And are we good? Okay.
Yes, that works.
All right. Now I just have to get the fingers going. Okay, so I just, in terms of the content that I want to cover off this afternoon is to talk to you a little bit about the compensation review project that we've initiated for the town, which is inclusive of the library positions. I'll touch on a little bit of the concepts and principles that go into a compensation design process in a project. We'll talk about the process that we're going to implement and the approach that we're going to take for this review, and talk about comparators. My apologies, I have a council reference on there. The presentation, I modified it a little bit for the library board, but the presentation in essence was also presented to council. And we had a good discussion around the comparator group, so it's still to be finalized. And then just a quick brief shot of what the project timelines are expected to be. So in terms of the mandate, we were engaged by the town of Blue Mountains with to undertake the compensation review for them. And it's really to ensure that the organization is paying appropriate. It doesn't mean that we want to pay at the leading edge of the Ontario public sector or municipal sector, but we don't want to be necessarily lagging. So making sure that there's appropriate levels of compensation for the non-union employee group, and making sure that we are pay equity compliant. And I should apologize, I'm looking off this way because my screen is over here for the slide deck. So the scope of the review will cover off job evaluation. So that will help us establish internal equity. So we're going to implement a new job evaluation tool that is pay equity compliant. We will undertake an external market review to assess the external competitiveness for the talent that you have in the organizations. We will undertake the pay equity analysis as well, which is the male-female gender comparison. And I'll talk a little bit about what exactly pay equity is, just to make sure we're all on the same understanding level. And then we wrap all of that up and we come up with a salary structure, the pay structure development, which is ultimately the output of the review. A little bit about Gallagher Benefit Services. So we are part of a large insurance organization, Insurance and Risk, out of the United States. But Gallagher acquired McDowell Associates, which is the company that I had originally worked for, which is a small boutique compensation firm. We were acquired by Gallagher in 2015, and then they acquired the Compass Group, another compensation and HR consulting group in Toronto. They were acquired in 2019. So the two groups together now comprise the HR compensation consulting group or practice in Toronto. We have in-depth expertise and working knowledge. We've worked with all kinds of compensation data. We've developed tools and helped develop processes for organizations, everything that you need to do in order to establish a total rewards design program. Pay equity and job evaluation happen to be particular areas of expertise for our organization and the consultants and my peers that I work with. So we do design and implementation of both of the pay equity analysis and job design. Extensive experience developing and communicating compensation pay, compensation philosophy, also referred to as your target market placement, and designing pay structures that are aligned to the external market. The team that's been assigned to the project, there's 3 of us. There's myself, and I'll be the project lead, and I have 2 colleagues working with me that will help me with the analytics and some of the job matching and the job evaluation process as well. All 3 of us have experience in the municipal sector. I've worked with both of them for quite a number of, well, with one of them anyways, for quite a number of years, and the other one is a new addition to our organization and has already demonstrated some exceptional skills in terms of job evaluation and market analysis. In particular, Susan Fong, myself, we have worked in the municipal sector, strong focus there. That's my primary area of work. And that has included a number of library files. I will be honest and say that usually we say, no, we're not doing any more libraries because they can be very difficult files to work on in terms of pay equity. because for pay equity, you need to have a male comparator, and usually you have to draw on town positions for your male comparators. And then there's the whole issue of part-time work versus full-time work. So I'll go into that a little bit as well. But here we are. I'm happy to be working with you. So background to the general assignment, the last market review that was completed for the town, inclusive of the library positions, was in 2017. And you have a corporate policy at the town that says that you should be conducting a market review or an assessment every 4 years. Every 4 years is in keeping with good business practices in the sector and generally in compensation review in general terms. The pay equity analysis was updated at that point in time as well. The scope that we are dealing with in terms of the entire portfolio of work is approximately 150 full-time and part-time positions. They're all non-union. We will also include some seasonal roles as well as required under the pay equity legislation. So pretty well the only thing that's not included is any union positions or any student positions. And we don't include students in part because they're not necessarily, they're not required to be included in a pay equity analysis. When I did the launch meeting with Sarah, we talked about what's the environment like, what are your issues that you're having, what is the compensation program doing for you or not for you. And she did identify that there is some experience that you're having in terms of recruiting and retaining talent. And the reasons that have been cited by some people, either declining offers or declining promotions in some cases, is that the pay is really the issue. It's just not recognizing the skills and the commitment that the individuals are looking for. Specific to the library, and I've drawn from the report that was shared with me for these points here, is that the library staff had a satisfaction survey completed in 2018, so not too dated. And there was a citing that the low wages are an issue amongst the employees. And that speaks to internal equity, external equity and your competitiveness placement. The library CAO, Sabrina Saunders, has identified some concerns around internal equity as well, identifying some of the comparator positions from the town versus where the library positions are sitting. So there's some opportunity to take a look at that equity part, and that speaks to job evaluation. There was also mention about part-time status, having changed full-time jobs to part-time jobs, and then organizational staffing issues. I had to make a note that their concerns or valid concerns from within the content of the report. However, they're not part of the compensation review in particular. Whenever we launch a compensation program or project review, these are the basic principles or components that we talk about in terms of how we're going to approach or things that we have to consider in a compensation assessment. So the very first part is about fairness. So how do you establish fairness in a compensation program or a salary structure? We have to establish job rates that are based on the value of the jobs to the organization, and value is determined through a job evaluation program or job evaluation tool. And we actually have to evaluate skills, qualifications, and a few other factors that are important to pay equity. We have to make sure that you're compliant. As your compensation advisor, we have to ensure that you are compliant with the pay equity legislation. Which is really an assessment of male jobs and female jobs relative to one another. Competitiveness, no point in having a salary grid that's not competitive if it's not working for you, if it's not attracting the right talent, if you are losing staff to other organizations, then there's something wrong with your job rates. They're not competitive or not sufficient to retain the staff. And then ultimately it comes down to affordability as well. It'd be nice to go into a job evaluation or a compensation program, do a presentation to an employees and say, it's wide open. We're gonna have all kinds of increases, but that's just not practical in a public sector setting or background. So we have to keep an eye on affordability as well. So for developing a pay program, these are the steps or the phases that we walk through. A little bit of repetition here, but first of all, we collect job information. So we have to make sure that we have the foundation upon which everything else is built is up to date. It has to be robust enough that we can accurately evaluate it. Job information comes from job descriptions, or it can come from job information questionnaires. At the town level, we have established that the job descriptions have all been updated, and I also note from the admin report that was submitted or shared with me is that the library jobs are all up to date as well. So that's a good starting point, and they're reasonably robust. So that means that we don't really have to go through a job information questionnaire process. Any information that's not in the job descriptions, I'll go back to employees and to managers to make sure that we have all of the information we need. So once we have the foundation information, the data, then we evaluate it. And we will, different approaches that we can use for job evaluation, which is through an HR team. If you have an HR staff that's large enough to be able to accommodate doing job evaluation on a regular basis. You can establish a job evaluation committee that could do the evaluations, or an external consultant, or it could be any combination of these approaches to job evaluation. Then we take a look at pay equity, and the legislation is very specific in terms of how we have to apply pay equity analysis and undertake the analysis. But really it starts with saying that we have to value jobs, all jobs in the organization, on the basis of 4 factors: skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions. And how we break down those factors in practical sense in terms of the organization is somewhere where we have a little bit of leeway, because you have to make sure that the factors, the sub-factors that you have, align to your organization and reflect the jobs that you have. Market review, we'll take a look at a comparator list. We've had some excellent discussion around the comparators, because it's critical to get the comparator list correct. If you don't, then you're basing the information on wrong or perhaps inflated or undervalued organizations. But we generally look at geography, similar sized organizations that can be measured in a variety of ways, and making sure that they have similar services. So in this instance, we have to make sure that the comparators also have, at least enough of the comparators also have library organizations attached to them. Again, we take all of the information, wrap it up, and then we develop a salary structure. And there's a bit of science behind how we do the salary structure. In terms of making sure that it's wide enough across. So when you go from entry level to the top level, you have enough room for people to grow in, as well as some structure when you progress from one level to another in the hierarchy. Developing a pay program, that's the development part. It's in place, but then there's also ongoing maintenance. And that's really important that you keep it up to date, you keep refreshing it. And as your corporate policy already says, you review it externally every 4 years, which is a good practice to have. A little bit about pay equity. Some people mistake it for equal pay of equal work. Equal pay of equal work is if I'm a planner, and I'm a female and I'm sitting beside my colleague who is also a planner and he happens to be a male, we're doing the same job, we're required to be paid the same. That's equal pay for equal work. That is covered under the employment standards. So Ontario Pay Equity talks about comparing jobs that are different but of similar value. So it's equal pay for work of equal value, and it's comparing female-dominated positions to male-dominated positions. And the Act says how we have to define what's a female job versus a male job. So if you have more than one incumbent, then we do a count. We simply say if 60% or more are females, then it's a female gender position or job class. If it's 70% or more that are of the incumbents are male, then it's called a male job class. You can have gender neutral. You can have a 50-50, one male, one female in the job, and it's always been that way, and it's stereotypically that way. Then it's gender neutral, and it's no longer considered under pay equity requirements. When we are looking at the gender predominance as well, we have to take into consideration, as the Act says, historical incumbency and stereotypical incumbency. So if you've had a single incumbent position, we'll take the CEO of the library by way of example. If the incumbent has been in the job for maybe 1 year, but prior to that it was a male, maybe that incumbent was there for 3 years, but prior to that it was a female. So we have to take a look going backwards to see what was the trend that we had for the incumbency. And then the last test that we have is looking at stereotypical incumbency. So I had a client where the receptionist was a male, had been a male incumbent in that role for the last 10 years. So it passed all of the previous tests. However, if we think stereotypically in the broader employment and labor market, a receptionist is generally defined as a female dominated position. So that would be the gender we would assign to that position for pay equity. There's 2 phases to pay equity. You have to achieve it. That means you've done your analysis, you have adjusted all the female jobs to ensure that they're paying at least the same as the male position within the same band. And there's a little bit of technicality in this particular slide, where if you have a pay band, you pick the male that's in that band and it's compared to the females in the same band. That's called job-to-job comparison. If you don't have a male comparator in the band, then you have to do what's called proportional value. And we have to do this in most cases with libraries, where you plot the male jobs, their job evaluation points, and you plot their salary, their job rate, and you create what's called the male pay line. You take your female job, you've evaluated it, it comes up with so many points, you take that point up to where it meets the male pay line, and then that becomes your pay equity adjustment rate. So those are the things we have to take into consideration. The other part is if you have a female part-time position compared to a male full-time position, the male full-time position also has access usually to benefits. So we have to include the value of benefits into that calculation and apply it as part of the comparative salary amount, because typically part-time staff do not have access to benefits. So the other half of pay equity compliance is making sure that you maintain it. So on an ongoing basis, making sure you're evaluating new jobs and changed jobs, and you're doing the comparative analysis. If you have a lot of organizational change, you might do it on an annual basis. If you have pretty steady state, then you might do it maybe every few years. So the review that we're going to undertake, the approach that we're using in this particular project, is to establish internal equity. As I said, we have library job descriptions. They're up to date. We're going to use those as the basis for the evaluations. And we will follow up with managers and with Sabrina on any information that may be missing or that's not clear, if we have some questions around it. So we have to make sure we've got some solid data. We will be using a Gallagher Universal Job Evaluation Plan. It is our proprietary JE plan or tool, and it's been used in many organizations across Ontario, across Canada, and in a variety of different, in fact, all kinds of sectors in private and public and not-for-profit organizations. I or my colleagues will be evaluating all of the jobs together, and then the output from those job evaluations, we call it a ladder chart, which is really just putting all of the job evaluation points into a rank order to find out their relative value. And we use that hierarchy to start grouping jobs into the pay bands. There is some science and some math and some logic that has to go into how we are banding our positions. So we take a look at organizational structure. Obviously, you don't want an employee and their supervisor in the same pay band. But we also have to make sure that there's some mathematical symmetry to the calculations on the banding structure. The emphasis here is that in order to support pay equity, if you have an erratic structure where one band is maybe 25 points wide, another band is 30, and then another one is 21 points, if there's no logic to it, the Pay Equity Commission could theoretically come in and say, this looks a little odd. have you orchestrated your banding structure to the disadvantage of female positions? So that's the lens that we have to put it through. So once we have all the positions into the banding structure, into a preliminary banding structure, we will share that information with the senior management group and hopefully with employees as well, so that we can validate the information. So we do the job evaluation, we put them in bands, then we want to say, does this make sense? And if it doesn't, tell us what's askew, what's amiss. And that is through employee appeals or employee reconsiderations. There might be some things in a job description that it's really hard to get the essence of that job or to describe some of the nuances of a position. So we have the reconsideration process to have those discussions and to validate our evaluations of the positions. Once we've validated everything, then we lock it down, and we then do our pay equity analysis to identify the male jobs and the female jobs, and we'll do that with in accordance with the legislation. The external market review. So as I said, we'll give some consideration to municipal organizations, looking at comparable size, and size can be the population, it can be an operating budget, it can be the employee headcount, or all of these things that we would be looking at. We want to consider similar employment markets. So if you're drawing your potential candidates from, a specific kind of geographic area, similar employment market. Equivalent scope of services. So we want to make sure, as I said, that our comparators, or maybe not all of them have a library, but at least enough have libraries that we can then do some job matching to your positions. Seasonal influx is something that is considered in this particular project because of the nature of your town and the services that you provide. The corporate policy also identifies municipalities that are market competitive. So in other words, not selecting comparator organizations that we know are either quite lagging in the market or have not done a compensation review in a long, long time, and they're not staying current with their organizations. So we want to make sure that we have some of that included in our considerations. And then after our discussion with the council, I've added the last bullet there about assessment growth, because there was concern and discussion around assessment growth as an indicator of the kind of services that you're having and the pressures that the municipality is having in terms of attracting and retaining talent, because there's a lot of pressure on different aspects of the municipal portfolios. And so you want to have comparator organizations that are experiencing the same kinds of things. In the prior reviews that were completed in the municipality, in 2012, there were 8 municipal comparators, and in 2017, there were 12. There's some overlap between those two groupings of comparators. Some of it had changed, but others had stayed the same. So the list that I have up here is actually after our review and discussion with the senior management group and the council. It's not finalized yet. We're still doing a little bit more digging around some of the statistics, but this is kind of the direction that we're going in terms of the comparators that we are giving consideration to. And I did a double check to make sure, and a good majority of these organizations do have libraries. I'm not so sure about museums, but at least we have the library positions that should be represented in the analysis. I'll pause at this point in time just to ask if there's any feedback that you have on the comparator list, since it's not something we have totally locked down as of yet.
Are some of those included because of tourism?
Pardon me?
Are some of those comparators because of tourism, like Niagara on the Lake, for example?
Well, Niagara on the Lake was, yes, a strong voice at council that included Niagara on the Lake. So yes, it's the tourism, it's the influx of the seasonal people. It's apparently the assessment growth though as well. We're looking at that. The way I look at Niagara on the Lake is close to Toronto and the GTA influence of salaries and wages, but far enough away that it's not a direct GTA comparator. And similarly with Blue Mountains, I mean, you're close enough that you're getting some of that influence, but it's not direct. So people from Toronto are not commuting to Blue Mountains for their job, but there is some influence there as well.
But there's also some similarities in population size
Mhm.
and also the agricultural aspect. So their economy has those two fronts, agriculture and tourism, as ours does. So we actually, in some other matters that we've looked at, we've found that Niagara-on-Lake is a very good comparator for us, and they've found that we are a good comparator for them. But I understand that you've had some trouble getting them to open up and answer any and be cooperative.
But I think I
So-
have a few connections on council that are going to help me out there.
Okay, I used to be able to, but I don't know anybody there
Okay.
anymore. So
Okay.
From the library end, we have a few that are on here that are good comparators to what we do. Our size is more representative of our full population, not just our full-time resident population, since many people who are seasonal or weekenders, more the weekenders, they're still using our services on the weekends when they're coming. So we don't plan for a 7,000 population. We are responsive to the 15,000 population. So Innisfil and New Tecumseth are two that I would definitely look at from a library perspective. They are a bit bigger than even our 15,000 numbers, but they do a similar level of work to the types of things that we produce, from technology and maker spaces and alternate collections that we're doing. Another one that's not on there is East Gwillimbury, which also has a very similar model in the way that we're doing our work.
another issue that we looked at too is growth, and well, Niagara-on-Lake is experiencing the same sort of growth we are, as is Innisfil and Collingwood. So these places are seeing a lot of people, an influx of people. It's triggered by the pandemic, but it's more, they've decided this is the trigger that's going to get them to move out of the city and out to smaller communities or away from the city at least. So those are all good comparators because they're seeing this influx of people the same as we are.
All right.
I find Simcoe County is a bit of an odd comparison because they provide regional support for public libraries, but they don't provide library service directly.
Correct. So I like to include a county level and upper tier in some of our reviews. Originally, the list had Grey County because that's the county that you're part of. But the feedback from both senior management and council is that it's really not the same. To the point about assessment growth, it's not growing as much, has different services. I think the wastewater was an issue in terms of it's not comparable. So with including a county, there are some jobs that will get matches, but there are other jobs that we won't. I mean, because they offer different services, but there's enough there that I think we would still have value adding them to our comparator.
Simcoe from
Sorry, I was just going to say that was the mayor's suggestion, and I agree with it. We are much more like Simcoe County than we are the rest of Grey, strangely enough. For example, our assessment base is within a couple of $100,000 of Collingwood and Wasaga Beach, and about double that of Owen Sound. And Owen Sound is about double Meaford and some of the other places. So we are a different animal within Grey County, and we're almost like Gulliver. We don't really fit. So Simcoe County is a better comparator for us.
Yeah, I would agree. From the library and museum end, there really are no comparisons in Gray County to what we're doing and how the model that we're using. Even Owen Sound is significantly different in the way we're working. Simcoe County could have some comparators for our museum to their archivist curator aspects. Our closest would be Durham County, but I know that's a very different, like you don't want to add a county in just for the sake of what the library museum pieces are. So I would say from the Simcoe County, if you're not finding the walking comparators for the museum and looking at that archivist level that they have at their site in Simcoe County could also be a very similar kind of expectation, expertise, and responsibilities to our curator and museum staff.
Okay, appreciate the feedback. Okay. So the next steps, just a quick overview of the timeline. So we are hoping to, well, we are doing the stakeholder launches right now. So we've met with senior management, we met with council, the library board, and next week we'll be launching with employees. Actually, I just had a thought. I'm not sure if the library staff have been invited to I would assume they are. Yes, okay. So they can participate in the town halls, and we'll go through a similar type of presentation just so that they have an understanding of what the project's about, what are the elements in the project, and help manage some of those expectations, because some employees may hear rumors of a compensation review, and so they start to get all excited about all the ills of their jobs that are going to be, miraculously cured from. So I have to put some parameters around that, and to temper their expectations that they don't go out and buy the boat kind of thing before we land on where our compensation is going to go. So those will take place next week. We're confirming the comparators, and then we will actually, once we confirm the comparators for final, we will go out and start soliciting those comparators and do the job matches. After the town halls, we'll start doing job evaluation over the month of July. Hopefully do some employee validations July and August. The timing's not great, but hopefully we can capture all employees that want to have a review. We will then do the analysis in August, early August, set up the salary structure design, do some cost impact and some testing again for pay equity through the month of August, and then have a target final report to prepare and present by mid to late September. So that's our aspirational timelines that we're working on. Okay, and that's the essence of the presentation. Any other questions?
I have a question around, I know we looked at the municipal comparators, probably as good as it gets. I can't imagine a small community with the growth that we have, and I don't know what the shift between weekends and full time or now is with COVID, but it's a challenge, certainly in town. And I'm wondering though about the high cost of housing. I mean, I know Niagara Lake is quite high, but we seem to, there seems to be a problem with maybe our workers, certainly the service sector, being able to live here. I don't know if you're capturing that or
Good. So housing was raised as an issue as well in the prior conversations that we had. I mean, you can't solve a compensation review or solve a housing affordability issue with a compensation review for the town. It's just, it can do many things, but it can't solve all the problems. But it will be something that we'll have to consider. It's not something I can directly pull in terms of the comparators. I mean, Collingwood, I am doing work with Collingwood right now, and they've cited housing as a severe issue that's impacting their attraction and retention. But the way we would address the housing issue is by making sure that maybe your target market that you're going to try for, instead of being the middle of the market, maybe we need to migrate a little higher in the market to account for some of these other differences that you have, such as housing, to attract and retain your staff, and particularly attracting, because if they're already there, then hopefully they have their housing. So that's the only way we'll get to kind of addressing the housing issue in general terms.
Okay.
Where it does come into play is that even the people that work for us can't necessarily afford to live here. And so that's an issue for us to look at.
Jane, if I may, in your introduction, you said quite early on that your company works in the municipal environment and including in municipalities with libraries. But you also made a remark that I didn't quite make a note of, that you didn't want to do libraries anymore. Am I right?
Well, it's a bit tongue in cheek. Libraries are a challenge in terms of trying to find the pay equity analysis can be challenging with libraries. Particularly in this instance, you have a library that's the compensation is attached to the town, so that's a good thing. But if you have a library that's separate from the town, and they have their own union, they have their own negotiations of rates that are separate from what the town is doing, then we go to do job evaluation and pay equity analysis, and we have to bring those two together. So the town may have had a exponential growth and increases in compensation, and if we take those male comparators, bring them over to the library situation that maybe didn't have the same kinds of increases, then we are forcing up the library job rates to meet the town male rates. And sometimes it's a significant bump up. So trying to do the analysis that's within the compliance requirements of the legislation, but also being realistic. So it speaks to that affordability part. We have to really do some due diligence in how we've evaluated the positions, making sure we've got the right male comparators in the position. So I apologize. It was a bit tongue in cheek that I didn't want to do libraries. They're just very challenging in some instances. I expect this one to be much cleaner because your rates are attached to the town. So there's already some essence of pay equity and internal equity in your existing structure. So hopefully we won't see those same challenges come forward.
What do you mean? What do you understand by our rates are attached to the town?
Well, I have a salary grid here that has the pay band structure that the town
yes,
has, and the library jobs are within those pay bands.
Right. You haven't studied that yet, have you?
No, not in any great detail, no.
Okay. So a job is a job, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And leaving out the pay equity, because I think we're mostly female in the library, aren't we, Sabrina?
Yes.
Yeah,
And that's the problem. If you have a part-time female job in the library, you don't have a part-time male job in the library that you can marry up and say, okay, they're getting paid the same.
Too keen on libraries there.
Pay equity is going to be a huge part of the study as it pertains to the library staff. Just given the expertise, responsibility of what a female is doing has historically been below what a male counterpart would be doing, but there is no direct comparator, which is why in the report we outlined various jobs that we thought were sort of the cleanest of the walkovers between job to job on the job description areas, including what those responsibilities, experience, and independent work would be.
So that speaks to the internal equity. So we have a new job evaluation tool. We'll evaluate all the positions and see where things land.
You'll also be evaluating our part-time positions. Is that true?
Yes.
Can you tell me what some of the factors are within your job evaluation system?
Sure. We have knowledge, which is formal education. I should have put a slide up here. Apologize. So there's formal education, years of experience, both coming into the job, how much experience do you require when you're being recruited, and how much experience does it, or how much time is required to learn the job, learn the nuances of the organization and apply that prior experience. We have judgment and problem solving skills, which is called decision making. And included in that factor, we also take into consideration some of the operating positions. So speaking to the male positions, the water operators, the snowplow operators, things like that. So we take into consideration, the judgment required to operate the equipment, maintain the equipment, and use the equipment. Then we have communication as one of our factors. So who are you communicating to, and what kind of technical experience, like the technical terminology, are you required to convey? So it's who are you talking to and what are you talking about or communicating about? Is it just to convey direct information, or do you have to have a full conversation to ensure people understand the communications? Is it sensitive? Is it complex? Is it political? Things like that. And we have independence of action. What's the hierarchy in your organization for you to be taking action? Do you have to check all the way along, or do you have basically, here's your portfolio, go forth and make decisions, and only if it deviates from the policy do you have to come back to me? Leadership skills. So if you're a supervisor, you would get accountability for that, responsibility for people, responsibility for your actions as well. So that's the impact of errors. So when you make decisions, what's the impact? Is it going to impact on the finances of the organization, the reputation? And a lot of the library positions would be reputational, customer service. If you're not doing your job effectively, or if you're not staffed appropriately, or doing the service correctly, then it has a reputational impact on the library organization. Working conditions and physical effort, we also take into consideration as well, and mental effort. So that's the concentration, sensory efforts.
You mentioned that the team is the Gallagher consultants. If there's any uncertainty about what a job entails, do you go back to incumbents or somebody to ask?
We would go back. In the case of the library, we would start with Sabrina. So we would say we've got some discrepancies here, or some gaps in understanding, what's the hierarchy, what's your financial accountabilities, or things like that. So anywhere that we would have some uncertainty, we would go back through Sabrina, and she may or may not say, okay, let's have a sit down and have a chat with the employee to make sure that I may even say, just walk me through your day. Tell me who do you talk to during the day? What kinds of pieces of information are you touching? And what are you doing with that information, so that I can have a general idea how it applies or how it's interpreted against each of the different factors in our tool.
You mentioned that there would be validation with senior management and possibly an appeal process. Can you talk a bit more about what the appeal would look like, and also who would be your senior management crowd that you'd be speaking with?
Okay, so once we have the ladder chart, which is the hierarchy, so we have the positions all in their bands, in the preliminary bands that as we've come up with through job evaluation. So we'll send that to the senior management team. So that would be the town, and I believe, Sabrina, you're a member of the leader group, the director group, or if
Yes,
you can correct me if I'm.
Yeah. For this, I am, yes.
We would,
yeah. So we would put it through that filter first. We'd say, what do you think? Are there any red flags there? And they might, because they know the jobs better than we do, they might say, no, you've got this job sitting in band 5, and no, that just doesn't make sense for what they're doing. It really should be in band 6, or maybe it should be in band 4. So there might be some reasons behind it. It would just be a flag for us to get more information. I'll go back to my ratings, I'll look at it, and I'll go, okay, so we're obviously misinterpreting some part of that job. And that might mean we go back to the job description, go back to the manager, go back to the employee to get better information. So that would be one level of validation. If in some organizations just leave it at that. And other organizations will then say, no, let's share the ladder chart with all employees and let the employees say, hey, wait a minute, for the last 10 years, my job has always been aligned to this analyst position. And now the analyst is in a band higher than me. How come I didn't get moved up? So we would say, if you have some concerns about your band placement, go back and take a look at your job description first, because that's the information that I use to evaluate your position. Make sure it has everything in there that you're doing, or it covers all the aspects of your responsibility, your accountabilities. So that's the starting point. And then if you would like to have a discussion with the consultant who evaluated your job, then we'll have a meeting, we'll set up a meeting, and we'll have a conversation. So I always put the caveat to the employees and let them know that an appeal meeting or a reconsideration meeting does not mean I am going to sit there and go through the entire evaluation process with you. Because number one, you've not been trained on the job evaluation tool, so you don't have that interpretation skill with it or experience with it. But also, job evaluation is all about relativity. So if I've evaluated a position, a supervisor, a level 5, then the employees that report to that position in most factors should not be higher than what the supervisor is. It can be in some aspects, but not in most of them. So they don't have that perspective. They haven't seen all the evaluations of all the different jobs, which we do. And I'm not prepared to share all that information with employees. So I really focus the conversation on, tell me about your job. What is it that you do? What kind of decisions are you making? Give me some examples of the decisions that you're making. What makes those decisions complicated? What makes them difficult? Are they political? Are they sensitive to the community? Are there other ramifications, or is it complex because there's just so many different variables? If you're making decisions based on facts, A plus B must equal C, those are pretty straightforward decisions, because if it doesn't equal C, it goes back to the hopper. However, you might be in a position that has to use other kinds of qualitative information, which is a little more difficult to deal with in your decision making and your judgment and your analysis. So these are the kinds of conversations that I would have with employees. I also am upfront with the employees as well to say, request the reconsideration. There's possible outcomes are your position is reevaluated, I've changed a factor, and your position moves up a band. Or I've changed a factor and your position stays in that same band, because it's a point spread that we have to stay within. So that's two of the options. Or it could be I changed a factor and your job actually went down. It has only happened to me once, where I evaluated a position, had an employee appeal, and I thought I've really I had overrated the position. And it actually did go down in a pay band and was aligned with other positions that were better suited to that role. But I do disclose that to employees when I say, okay, if you're going to have an appeal, just be aware that it's a process where we're trying to get the best fit for the job and put it in the right band that's equitable internally. But there's the good comes with the bad. Possibly.
In this process, has a decision been made that there will be an appeal process? I think you in your slide said possibly.
Yeah, I think through the conversations we've we prepare the presentations and then we keep our conversation going. But I believe we are committed to doing the appeal process.
Yeah, I have 2 more questions. I know there are probably others that have questions, but you mentioned that it would go back to the senior management in terms, you called it the ladder. Several of those senior managers will also be subject to the job evaluation.
Mm-hmm. So
where are you going with the ladder for those that would be among the decision makers?
Well, the CAO has to also weigh in. To put it bluntly, I expect the senior leadership to be big people and be objective. And to be perfectly honest, the director group tends to be only across a few bands. Sometimes, depending on the size of the organization, the directors will all be in one band, and they all basically agree that they're all different jobs, but relatively equal. But then there's other organizations where I might have directors or senior leaders that might span 2 or 3 bands. And so it's just the nature of an organization. I have to send this back to them in terms of its entirety.
I guess I should be direct and say, will the library board be involved, particularly when it comes to our CEO's evaluation? And an opportunity to appeal if we.
Yeah, I haven't formally put it into the process or the project plan, but it could be something that we could consider, that where the band placement of the position lands, we take it back to the library board.
And Sarah, do you see an appetite for that at the town?
I think we can certainly look at that as well. We want to make sure it's a fair and objective process. So I think, I think there's opportunity to look at that for sure. And it's Sabrina and her role that can provide that, appeal that initially herself as the employee. So she does have that right herself to do.
Yeah. And I'll just add, I have had one situation where I actually had the appeal meeting with the CEO of the library, and a member of the board sat in on that appeal as well to help. I don't want to use the word advocate, but also explain, the expectations on that role and the scope of the responsibility that the position had. So we could do it that way as well.
We appreciate it's in a unique situation. And we want to make sure it's a fair and equitable process. So
Jane, can I change subjects?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit of a rookie or naive on this whole subject, so bear with me. But you've worked with municipalities, many, I'm sure that's not the question. What I'm saying is, somewhere along the line, you have made a final report to the various municipalities. And I don't know what form that takes, and it doesn't matter, but out of a scale of, let's say, out of 10, out of scale of 10, how many have been accepted first time?
I would say 99% of them. I'm trying to think of any that have actually been declined, and I have none that have not been approved.
The way you proposed them.
The way they were proposed.
So 100% success rate.
Yes.
Good.
Now the implementation could be a little bit different. So I did have one where, in order to help meet their budget, they agreed with the design, the compensation design, but they said, okay, we'll implement, if the increase was, let's say, for argument's sake, 2%. So they gave everyone the 1% for the first 6 months, and then they brought them up to the full rate in the last 6 months of the year. So
Jane,
it was
that
staged
out of my pay scale.
Okay.
Okay.
That was a related question I wanted to ask, was, do you actually provide recommendations on how to implement?
Yes. Yes, definitely. In terms of the how, if you have a step structure, and there's a couple of ways you can go about implementing a new grid. So you take the employee's current job rate and you look at the new structure and you say, what's the closest step that to their current salary that's at least equal to or more. So they can't make any less, even if it's a penny. So they go to the step that's closest to or greater than their current rate. Or you can say, I'm at step 5 in my old grid. I'm going to step 5 in the new grid. The first approach is the one that we typically recommend because it's more cost effective. It's less costly, let's say. The other approach tends to have a higher implementation rate or cost to it. So most organizations will go with the first approach unless culturally you have an organization that has always said, well, if I'm at step 5, I should go to step 5 of the new grid, or if I've been reclassified, then I go to the same step. So it's a bit of a cultural thing. Not a lot of organizations do that approach because, like I say, it is a little bit more expensive. But I've had a couple where they've said, no, this is just, it would not fly in the other approach, that they say, no, I have to go step to step. So.
Okay, Jane, listen, this is it's important that all board members have a say. And I think Jesse's hand was up first.
Thank you. I was just wondering whether, as part of your brief, you make recommendations as to bans, that is to say, as to whether individuals or particular jobs should be in a higher or a lower band than they are at present.
Yes, yes. So that's the banding structure. When we come out with the ladder chart, it will show whether a position was in maybe band 7 in the old structure, and I'm recommending they go into this structure in band 8. The bands might be a little bit different in terms of how they're cast, but definitely our first preliminary results will show the movement of staff.
Thank you.
Dorothy?
Oh, she's on mute.
Are you on mute, Dorothy?
Sorry about that. So maybe a similar question, but it's within the project scope, Jane, to actually change the grids and the bands within that. You're not just taking jobs and placing them different existing bands.
No, we'll take a look at the whole banding structure, definitely. Now, the intent is not to have total disruption. It's to, I mean, obviously you've retained people, you've recruited people, so your structure's working for you to a certain extent. But now it's to the point of the report that Sabrina had prepared is it's jobs evolve, jobs change, circumstances change. So now it's time to take a look at these jobs again, make sure that we've got the qualifications and the skills and the responsibilities accurately reflected, and that may result in them moving into a different group, different value group. So.
Thank you. And is there a desire to have more bands or less bands, or is that an issue for the town?
You have 17 bands right now. It depends on what the market tells us in terms of the similar value, as well as the points when we come up with job evaluation points to see how we how they land. Basically, there's no magic to number of bands. I mean, obviously, if you're a very small organization and you have 25 positions, you don't need 17 pay bands. But particularly, let's say at a county level, we might see a lot more bands because they have a broader spread of jobs and a bigger hierarchy that they have. So 17 bands might be a bit high, but I can't say at this point in time until we actually get into the numbers.
Joanne, I haven't heard from you.
It seems quite clear to me, unless I'm totally missing the point, but it's clear.
That's nice. Gary, did you have anything else to add? I know you spoke before.
I'm thinking about inflation figures seem relatively high right now, apparently temporary. Does that affect it at all, or is it really based on comparators or competition, if you like?
We don't consider inflation unless we are, let's say the project takes us to the end of the year and implementation will be next year, which it could very well be. So at that point in time, we might say, based on what the comparators percentage anticipated increases are, what published surveys are saying, the salaries are increasing in the private and public sector, and then any consideration on consumer price index, anything like that. So taking all of those pieces of information together, we may say, here's your 2021 grid, But if you're implementing it in 2022, this is the recommended increase. We call it aging that we would suggest you apply to it.
Okay, thank you. Rob, any more words of wisdom for wear your board member hat, would you?
Yeah, I had the advantage of listening to Jane the other day. I did just have one question though, and that was, would there be any discussion regarding things like attainable housing and the cost of housing that might go into these discussions, where you might discuss with employees whether they need more money to be able to afford to live here or something like that? Would anything of that nature be included?
Short answer, no. If I ask an employee, do you need more money? I think I know the answer 100%. I've done job evaluation and salaries reviews for quite a number of years, and I have never had an employee come to me and say, don't pay me anymore, you're paying me just right. Some employees like to keep their heads down and stay under the radar because they know that they're overpaid for what they're doing, but generally no one says that they're making too much.
Okay, because we did have a staff report that said that we are having trouble attracting people because of the housing prices. And Sarah, I think you talked to us about that the other day. And I just wonder if this might be an opportunity for us to look at maybe what the employees have to say about it.
Yes, that actually allows me, Rob, to depart from, shall I say, the norm for board meetings. I'm going to ask Sarah. Sarah, you're sort of new to this board. I mean, coming to this board.
Mm.
What do you think? Or what do you have to say? What do you suggest? Have you any questions for Jane or for board members, or for Sabrina for that matter?
Yeah, I think what will be important when we present the results will be to look at that data of where our pressures are with regards to recruitment and retention. And so when you look at those percentiles that we could consider going to, so perhaps leading the market, that will be all part of, I think, our report back to council ultimately about how we could alleviate some of these issues that staff may be feeling, or our ability to attract really great people because of the cost of living. And so I think that is all part of that report back, and how we can make sure we have a total compensation package that's attractive enough to keep the great people we have, but also attract the people that we're going to need now and into the future. So I feel as though it's kind of a part of a report back as to justifying why we maybe need to pay at a certain level.
Good.
I don't know, Jane, if that's...
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Sabrina, would you like to, I don't know, not have the last word, but have a bit of a word in this, since you haven't said too much?
Certainly. Our staff are aware of the study. We've been doing step for step as Sarah is preparing things for the town. Her and I have been very closely working together and making sure that our library, museum, GLAM staff are right in the loop. So we don't want anything falling through the cracks there. I know there are quite a number of staff who watch the board meetings, so they're probably watching this live on Facebook, and they are all scheduled for next week. We have 2 days, 3 different presentations. So all of our staff are involved in attending those presentations. And, we're here if there are questions about our job areas. We do understand that libraries and museums are a difficult area to assess, especially when it comes to the pay equity, but also because one library's skill set and expectation is totally different from another library's skill set and expectation. So we hope to have conversations further on this.
Thank you, Sabrina. Joanna, is that your finger I see up?
Yes. Just something anecdotal about why I say I understand and so appreciate this process. goes back to 50 years ago when I was in teaching in Quebec. And one year the government decided to strip everyone's grid, put us all down 1 or 2 steps. So I am so impressed by this whole process and the fact there is a possibility of appeal. Our choice was take it or leave it. So thank God we have moved ahead.
Thank you, Joanne. Before we come back to you, Jane, Laurie, I was just going to say, do any board members have anything else to say? And Laurie, you have?
It was just, I've heard the reference to total compensation a couple of times, but in terms of process, I'm hearing about salary. And total compensation to me normally also includes things like pension and benefits. I'm wondering if that plays any part in this at all.
So the focus of most of the work that we're doing is on salary. So the market review looks at salary, but part of when we solicit our comparators, we're also going to be asking them to share some information around paid time off and you know, some of the practices around overtime, particularly for managers and supervisors. How are you remunerating those employees for working overtime when they're not required to be paid overtime as per the Employment Standards Act, but not necessarily looking at insured benefits or pension. Everybody's pension is on par in the municipal sector. They're all in OMERS, so it's a direct equalizer. And the benefit packages, for the most part, I mean, some might offer a little bit more on vision, but less on dental. Some might have a little bit of premiums that you have to pay. Others might pay 100%. But I would say in general, the package is comparable. So we don't really take a look at that in the total compensation part of it.
And that's where, Mr. Chair, I believe we'll have to look at where our lowest band is falling, because those are all of those part-time staff, which are the only permanent part-time staff who aren't seasonal on the town's grid. So if you were looking at a total compensation, our part-time staff are actually making less because they're not receiving those additional benefit programs. And that's where was something that was done a number of years ago, moving everyone to part-time, that we're looking now at how do we have to start moving forward to bring that pool of staff into a full-time standing, which is a major increase when we start looking at the benefit package that has to be added on.
Sabrina, last chance, board members. Jesse?
Does that assume that everybody who's a part-time person does not want to be part-time?
We do know that our part-time staff are all working multiple jobs and are actively requesting full-time. And in many cases, they are filling in as many shifts as we can to get as close to full-time as they can. But that's just the hours. That still doesn't give them the benefit programs. So yes, we do know our staff, and it was part of the 2018 satisfaction survey, job satisfaction survey, and part of our sort of annual talks with our staff. It is a key request of our library specialists and museum technicians to be full-time.
Jane, we're taking up about 5 or 10 minutes more of your time than you did when I watched you on the council thing. But you have the last few moments. Please tell us all the good things you have to say about the library. And
The libraries are wonderful places. They're very quiet.
What?
They're nice, quiet places to escape from your husband.
Or wife.
Yeah, what about this report of yours? I'm putting you on the spot. I know I'm only kidding, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that about it for the deputation, Sabrina? I have to leave on Sabrina. I never know where I am.
Unless there were any other questions, yes, we can move on with the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you so much to both of you for being with us today.
All right.
And to Sarah, yeah, thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
we take a break now, should we? Never mind. We're gluttons for punishment. Is there any, there's no public input in this particular thing. We're moving on to item E2. Where's Sabrina? Oh, there she goes.
Yes. So no public input on the agenda and no correspondence, just the deputation for today.
Okay, thank you very much. All right. Now, I haven't said too much, but still, Sabrina, you're good. Section F is basically yours.
We just need to move the recommended motion or something about our correspondence, which included the deputation.
Oh. Oh, I
So
missed
just
that.
receiving the information in the deputation.
May I have someone move that this board receive the information, sorry, the information communicated in the deputation. Someone to move? Rob and a seconder?
I
Joanne.
see Joanne
Joanne.
said,
Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Now may I move on? And actually, the very first item is we have already received that report number 2118, Sabrina. So if you've got any comments, keep on, you carry it from here.
Okay. So I don't have any major comments on this report. Like usual, I'm here to answer questions if you have them. We are on track moving forward. We have achieved at this point 42.7% of the 2021 action plan, and we are 6 months, so we're just shy of being at the halfway mark in achievements compared to the month. And you can see that we have all of our statistics once again put in here. So if there's any questions, I am more than willing to respond to those.
Yes, I read those figures, yes. Any questions? Okay, can we move on then to F2, Sabrina?
Certainly. So the strategic plan working group, I don't know if Lori wanted to speak to this or if you'd like me to speak to it.
Well, actually, in my notes, I put down Lori and then Sabrina, but Lori, how about you talk about this group and what you're doing?
Okay, well, it was, there isn't much in this report. I don't think that we didn't end up covering in some degree this morning. You did, the reference to the ongoing micro surveys, the website, we do have plans for the print newsletter and some of the contents for that, which will include things like statistics to date on the surveys, the focus group dates and sign up and where to talk to us and how to book a meeting. So that will be focused on the strategic planning process. The expectation is that we'll be in a Blue Mountain Review around September 1st and publicly released as later that month. There was the discussion that came up about when we might include a listening report back at board meetings in future. And I'm just would like to suggest we might just want to do it here under, under F2 when we report from the working group, that there'd be a listening. We had that report, then we had the report back on the listening at that stage in the agenda as a possibility. The other thing that came up this morning that we really just sort of got started onto was, as part of the people we would like to listen to is counselors, and each making contact with different counselors. And we talked a bit about, because we want that to be a one-on-one opportunity, about who might be interested in speaking with whom. And I don't know whether, Sabrina, you were thinking that might be something that we would discuss in August, or whether that was something that we could entertain a bit now.
I was thinking that we would do that in August, but certainly if the board wants to talk about it, I did have it on our August list of sort of the pairings.
And it's you would discuss it with the individual board members rather than shall I say, use it loosely, the word dictate, thou shalt speak to such and such?
Yes, we will be having conversations with each of the board members so that we can work with them to make sure that they're comfortable with the process, and then pairing with a member of council to have that early conversation.
Okay.
So
And
that-
again, since we talked about it earlier in the training and not publicly, this would be speaking to counselors, yes, but speaking to them as individual members of the public, not asking them to speak about council perspectives, but their own personal aspirations and concerns and issues in the community.
Thank you, Lori. Isn't this the part where we, Sabrina, back to you. I'm sorry, Lori, are you finished in your report as such?
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah, as I was saying, isn't this the part where we discuss what the three of us will talk to the mayor and the deputy and Sean Everett about?
That would be in F3.2, yes.
Oh, I had 2.2, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
All right. Okay, Sabrina, the floor is yours.
Okay, so 3.1 was just listed here so that it is part of our strategic plan discussions. If there was any follow-up or further questions about what we just heard in the deputation, if you are comfortable with what we have, we can move on to 3.2.
Oh yeah, we're back to the deputation. Does anyone have any questions on that? Any? After the Jane is not with us here anymore.
Does the cost of that come out of the town budget, or come out of our?
It does come out of the town budget. In 2017, there were some questions that we had after it was done because we did not participate at the same level as we are this time. And then we did receive the bill for the follow-up discussions.
Good.
Basically, we asked them to open up areas, and we did receive that bill.
Okay. Now, what's the next thing, Sabrina? Then we're talking about this July 5th meeting, aren't we?
Yes. So July 5th, the board chair, board vice chair, and myself will be meeting with the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the CAO. This will be our second meeting. At the first meeting, we did have a list of areas that we wanted to focus on, which included our role in broadband, the 2022 budget process and plan, which we have definitely made some movement on. We were looking at some areas of priorities, building and hubs. So I would assume some of those will continue on in the next meeting.
Are you talking to me?
Just if there's anything else that members of the board feel would be pertinent for us to include in that hour meeting.
Yeah, if there is anything, let Sabrina and or myself know, and certainly Sabrina and Lori and I will chat before we go, right?
The only thing I would add to that list was strategic planning process to talk to him about how we're proceeding.
Good. We can
And the
do that.
information from us to them. So one of the thems is here.
That would be a good opportunity also to let the mayor and deputy mayor know. I know our Rob Potter knows as a board member, but to have the conversation where Rob can switch hats, just to let them know our intention to request counselors to sit as members of the public in a conversation with us. So that's also understood that we're not asking for any member of council to speak on behalf of council, just to give their own individual perspectives on issues, needs, desires that would be of relevance to strategic planning.
Good. Okay. All right. I guess we move on to your report then, Sabrina, F5.
Okay, so once again, we have our monthly statistics and highlights. This is of the month of May. You can see that there are quite a number of continued growth. One thing that I didn't actually mention, which could possibly have been in the business arising, but I can touch on it here, is we did make the presentation to council on June 1st. That was since our last regular board meeting, and that was on our year in review. And there was quite a number of really good comments, both about the year in review document that was produced, the film and the supporting statistics, but there were also really good comments about the fact that we were so well accessed during the pandemic when technically things are shut down, but we've continued to provide a full service model for a library and museum, even though people have not been physically in the building. Only about 3 months out of that year were they actually in the building, and in that case, limited capacity. But our numbers were quite high, and there were comments by counselors of that. So that's just a good point to note that they were very impressed with how we continued our service model. So continuing on that theme, you'll see that we have, high circulation, high digital circulation still. Even though our digital circulation has grown, we don't see a huge influx of one over the other. We saw that early on when physical materials were locked down for a portion of the year last year, very early on in the pandemic, but now that has been released and we're able to access our print materials as well. Our attendance in programs and events are predominantly virtual, but still continue to be quite high. So if there's any questions on our usage, I can respond to those. A few key things that we just want to point out. We have won again another award. So the Real History won the silver of the Telly Award, which is award put out for television, video, and screen. And it was in our area for the fossils of the Craigleith Fossil Program. So that will be presented to us very shortly. Of course, there's no major award ceremonies, so I guess it's in the mail. It's coming. But that statue, that award, will be on display in the museum for when the museum opens in step 3. They're not allowed, according to the province, to open until step 3. Beyond that, our surveys, we have some numbers here in case you are interested. We currently have 4 surveys that are out. We started with our general use in the buildings, moved on to virtual use, completed a study on governance, and then the website. And you'll see that the earliest one, which was the BMPL use, has 54 responses, and the others are much smaller. It's online, but what's happening is we're also giving them out in print. So when those books come back 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, the surveys are in there, and then we're adding those in. So you will find that as we continue, the other areas of responses will grow, and we do hope to be getting, a number of responses on each one. Unless there's questions, Mr. Chair?
Well, personally, I just want to make a comment that I find this particular report you provide us each month, Sabrina, it brings me up to date on what's going on. Thank you. Anyhow,
You're welcome.
May I have someone move that this board receive the various strategic plan discussions as information? Someone to move.
So moved.
Gary and seconder,
Second.
Dorothy, all in favor?
If I could have one quick question, Mr. Chair, and to
course.
Sabrina, can we make sure that the mayor has that information at the right time about the award? Because that may be something for him to mention in his video, his weekly video.
Certainly, we did pass that.
I think we should boast.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rob.
We pass that on to the communication department of the town, but we will also directly message the mayor to make sure that he's aware.
Okay, yes, we need a vote. All in favor of that last motion? That one's carried. Thank you. I'm on to item G, as in George. Any other business? Nothing planned. Okay,
I had no other business, no.
that's good.
So we can skip that section.
This is you again, Sabrina, because seems to be, it should be from us to generally, but seems to be coming from you.
So the community updates and news, that is the board's chance to speak. I simply list the items that are coming up for special events that you may want to be interested in, but nothing that I have to add.
Okay, any comments, questions? Yes.
I could add that I did sit in for the mayor on the weekly video this week, and I used the year in review and gave an update about that just to promote that and the library in general. So that was kind of spur of the moment, but I thought we should include something from the library. So.
Oh, good. We'll see about getting you a raise in salary from the board.
Double would be nice.
Not that.
Because I get the same you do.
That too, yeah, you can have half of mine. I'm not sure where I am now. Did we receive that information, all that round table information?
Not yet.
Well, I move that this board receive as information the various round table discussions. May I have a seconder?
Second.
Joanne. Is that all in favor? Carried. Very quick. Key messages, Sabrina. I didn't print that out, but they look good to me anyway.
So we've listed the virtual town hall, just sort of a teaser, knowing that it's coming. The micro survey launch, again, pointing those out in case anybody has not been aware of them and going to the website. Again, a summary of the meeting that we had, the June 1st council meeting, our meeting, and on June 3rd, and then having to do with the budget of 22. More to come from that as we move forward. The June 3rd staffing model was asked to be on. Service excellence, the ribbons of remembrance are on, and our Telly Award bit, and our ongoing call to artists, and a new book launch that happens on Monday. And then a piece of salvaged art is listed on there as well that will be coming to Ellie Shore. No rush on it. It probably will take us a good year before it's here. It is now in the hands of the depot in pieces and needs to be completely repaired and fixed. They removed it, which was lovely, but they did not plan on using it when they removed it. So there was some damage that we need to fix.
Okay, everyone happy with those key messages?
Yep.
Any additions? Well, I move that this board approve the release of the key messages as explained today. Seconder? Rob, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, moving on. I just wanted to double check something here, Sabrina. The next meeting, next regular board meeting, August the 19th. Did we?
So that is a question I have. We had thought that we were going to meet in July,
yeah,
and take the month of August off. Having been speaking with Ruth, the director of finance, she said that she will not have the draft agreement ready for the July meeting, which would mean we'd have to have a special meeting at some point in August. So would you prefer to just push everything back and just have the one meeting so we don't have to have an additional special?
I think we stick with the August meeting.
Okay.
What date?
Happy with everyone?
I won't be here.
I may also probably will be away as well.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting an August 19th meeting, and I'm away at a cottage rental for the week.
Do we want to then just postpone all of the summer and wait until we hear back when the agreement is done and then just do a poll and have a special meeting and just have the one? Or it could be a regular meeting that we just adjust the date.
I wonder if the first week of August would work.
How about Laurie, are you going to be away all of August?
No, just from the 13th to the 20th.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right. Well, as Gary, I think, suggested, maybe change the date of the regular meeting in August. We can do that. There's no problem.
So, Mr. Chair, how about I check in early July with the Director of Finance and see where we are with the agreement writing, and then get back to the board and we can set a date that works for everybody.
That sounds good. Yeah.
I don't want to pick the first week of August because the report might not be ready then.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's do it that way then. Okay. So,
Okay.
Unless anyone has anything else, I will now declare this meeting adjourned at 3:45. That's not bad. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, Morris.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.